If you're like most job seekers, you're going to Indeed.com or LinkedIn or other job boards, typing in software engineer, filtering by entry level, and just applying to whatever is there. The problem is that's what everyone is doing. So the competition is fierce. What if there was a better way? What if you understood what types of companies are more open to entry level developers and you targeted those specifically? That's why I'm chatting today with Nick Cosentino, a principal software engineering manager with 21 years of programming experience, where during that time, he's helped hire for smaller startups as well as big tech companies. So today we're unpacking the hiring dynamics between small versus large companies and how best to approach the hiring process for each if you're just starting out. All right, Nick, thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really interested in hearing your perspective as you've worked with startups as well as, even Microsoft, large company. And in each of those positions, you've been responsible or involved in some of the hiring process for these entry-level
That's right.
developers. So I'd like to pick your brain here then on kind of the nuance of what that looks like from a startup all the way to a large scale company. So can you kind of help paint the picture here? What, as a hiring manager, are you looking for in entry level developers, and how does that change depending on the company that you're in?
For sure. Yeah. And I think so. Something important that I'll mention kind of at the beginning of this is that we have to think about team composition, right? So I think it's some people, especially if you're more junior or kind of new to industry, you might think, well, isn't the best team just going to be staffed by like all the highest level engineers? And like on paper, that might look good, but it's really important that you build teams that have a range of levels and skill sets and things like that. You want diversity, not only in people's backgrounds and their skill sets, but also in their levels. And that way you do have some growth paths for people. So when people are saying, hey, there's no junior roles and stuff like that, like it might be harder because there's more competition, but we absolutely still need to look for entry level positions. So one of the big differences, if we're looking at big tech versus startups, that I found from my experience is that from a startup perspective, I've seen a couple of different things happen. One is that sometimes people in startups are looking for like cheaper labor, right? Like we want the junior developers because they can do the work and we can pay them less. Like from a startup perspective, that might be a bit of a strategy. But the flip side to that is that there's a bit of risk that can be associated with that. If you're bringing on more juniors, that might be hard to navigate. Bigger companies have a little bit more leeway there. So there's less risk to bring someone on. Obviously, we still want to bring on good candidates. But if you have someone that might need a little bit more ramp up time, it's not like the company is like, if we don't ship this software by the end of the week, we might not exist next week. So you just get a little bit more comfort at that level. So what I would say is when I'm looking for junior developers, if I'm at a startup, I need to make sure that they can ramp up fast. It's extra helpful if they do know the tech already, just because of that ramp up period really helps us de-risk as a startup. And I would say conversely, and I've shared this, publicly multiple times at Microsoft. I think out of the two teams that I've managed so far, I've had one person that was hired on that knew C# as our primary programming language ahead of time. So
Mhm.
that's what we use. And like, we're hiring on people that don't know it. And we're like, don't worry, we'll teach you, like, how to program different language. So we get a little bit more flexibility at bigger tech companies because there's less risk associated with hiring someone on. So I think that's a fundamental difference.
Yeah, and stop me if I'm incorrect here, because I've not worked for large companies at Microsoft scale, but at the mid-size companies, not non-tech firms like where I've worked, there's a typically have established relationships with universities too, where there's a funnel already for entry-level talent, which typically means that there's not a high demand for like older maybe is the wrong word, but like boot camp graduates are coming from like non-traditional backgrounds because they already
Yep.
have a funnel plugged into that university. So it might be more difficult to get in as a career changer later in life. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I and I should say whether or not I agree that that's a good thing is a different story, but
Yeah, there's a difference between how the world like should work versus like how it
yeah.
is.
But I do think that that's a very valid point. And even so, not just big tech, but at the startup that I was at, it's called Magnet Forensics before Microsoft. So I was there for 8 years, and we always had a funnel. So the city that company is located is Waterloo in Ontario, and there's the University of Waterloo. There is Laurier University. There's Conestoga College. Like it is a university town and a tech hub. So you constantly have like tons of students around you that are interested in looking for jobs. So very much kind of like pipelines set up. Obviously, different companies in different places might be set up very differently, but I think that is a common thing, that you will have companies that try to form those relationships for getting hiring and talent coming in, because it's strategically very beneficial for them to find people that are early in their career. They're excited to learn. You're starting them off. Again, if you're a startup, it might be more affordable. Again, whether that's right or wrong, just I think more reality. You can get junior talent generally for less money. So it could be a strategic thing as well.
Yeah, and then they don't have to pay the hiring fees. When I say the company doesn't have to pay the hiring fees for like a recruiting firm
Yeah.
to come in, or an agency to come in and help find these entry level roles. They already have that funnel because the schools want their students to be hired, so they're motivated to push you talent, and then you kind of get your pickings of whoever's there.
That's a huge part of it, right? Especially for smaller companies, you're trying to look for like cost effective ways to do anything, especially if you're not making money yet. Sometimes people hear about startups that have all this investment, but it's like, sure, if the company's not profitable, that money that's a huge dollar amount is basically just burning away until you are, profitable, and finding ways that you can save costs. Again, you want to bring in good talent. You might invest into a recruiting firm, but if you have a channel from universities and colleges, and it would be great to see more boot camps and stuff become parts of those funnels. In my experience, and this is, going back over the last 12 years or so, I didn't really see that with the boot camps, but it would be great to see that become more and more common.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot of openings are becoming more and more open, meaning for a long time you'd always see the 4-year bachelor degree required as a minimum. I am seeing more and more of or equivalent years of experience. It does seem to be opening up more, but
Right.
it still seems like the college graduate is still preferred in the current market. So thinking about your experience at a startup versus working at Microsoft, do you think that any one of those environments would have a higher likelihood of hiring somebody who is a later in their career, a career transitioner, somebody a boot camp grad or self-taught? Are any of those environments more receptive to somebody with a non-traditional background?
Yeah, no, this is a really good question because, again, if I go back over the past 12 years, I just historically have, and this is my experience, not what I say is this is good or bad, right? I did not see a lot of boot camp grads coming in or career transitioners. Not that it didn't happen, but it seemed pretty rare in general. So whether or not that was because the way that we were having roles open wasn't kind of, put in front of people coming from those backgrounds, whether our recruiting process just really didn't do a good job of incorporating those people. I actually can't comment, but what I can share is I just didn't see a lot of it happening. So the the thing at Microsoft is I I feel like there's opportunity like that, but the challenge is, given my time at Microsoft over the past 4 years, this is a huge shift in probably what most of us that have been in tech for a while have experienced with how difficult it is to get jobs. So I have a weird bias here where, again, given that the bar just keeps going up super, super high because there's so many applicants, uh, again, I haven't seen a lot of boot camp grads coming in. So that's been my experience going through those. But when I look on LinkedIn and other places, I am seeing that people are being successful across different areas, whether it's, small companies or big tech. So my experience has said I don't really see it happening, but what I'm observing is starting to look like a bit of the opposite, which is very good.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned earlier, especially startups are always looking for a deal because if they're pre-revenue, they are burning through cash quickly. So if they can get somebody who has 3 years of experience for an entry level role, uh, they'll take that. They'll consider that a bargain, and that's
Yeah.
oftentimes why I've seen why you see entry level jobs that still ask for a few years of experience because they can. They know they'll still get great applicants, um, and they're always looking for a deal.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to say that out loud, but again, it's what is good, what is right, I don't even know if you can say moral, but it's not what people want to hear, but it's the reality that if you have a lot of people applying, you're able to kind of set the bar higher and higher because people are still applying. So it's just kind of unfortunate reality.
Yeah, I read an article, and I can't quote off the top of my head or even its source. So I guess take this with a grain of salt. I'm horrible at this, but it was looking at the layoffs in tech since 2022, and
Sure.
is comparing that to the dot-com bust in the early 2000s. And it was saying that it's roughly comparable or even
Interesting.
set to exceed that level. So, this is the biggest reset in the software engineering space, in the last, 25 years. And
Well,
that's what we're right in the middle of right now. Now, it eventually we came out of that, and there was a big, you know, a lot of demand for developers in the 2010s or so. So maybe down the road it'll ramp back up, but
Yeah, I feel
that's
like
just where we are right now.
there's still tons of like demand for software engineers, but I think there's also just lots of people that are getting into it too. So it's yeah, very challenging landscape without a doubt.
Yeah, I'd like to unpack the relationship that you had with the recruiters at your
Sure.
company, depending on the company size. Because you mentioned something interesting there of just how the, the career transitioners, the boot camp graduates, they were not making it through to you when you were evaluating
Right.
candidates. So, who kind of controls what that minimum bar is? Is that the recruiters? Is that the hiring manager setting those standards? Or I guess, how does the hiring manager communicate with the recruiter to let them know, hey, I'm open to a non-traditional background. I'm open to XYZ. Or does the recruiter kind of make all of these assumptions and you're kind of left with, whoever is left? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I'll start from like the startup perspective, especially because I was sort of looped into this like consistently for 8 years. And being at a startup, like for those of you that haven't done it when it's an early stage startup, it's like no one knows like anything that's going on. So you're kind of just making up stuff as you go. And if you're, in my opinion, if you're doing it right, you're kind of testing things and going, this is working, let's keep doing it, or it's not, let's change it. And when it came to hiring, it was like, we have to keep refining how we're doing this. So we had to make sure that as hiring managers that we were being clear about what we wanted. And I can remember going through periods of like, oh, like, so it was a digital forensics company. Be like, oh, it'd be really good if we had someone with like this kind of forensic background or something. We're like, yeah, that would be nice, but it's completely unrealistic for us to be chasing like a super, super specialization. Like it's not going to happen. Or we'd say that we really need to get someone who's a good back end dev. And it's like, but the reality is we're building full stack, like desktop applications. Like you need to be in the user interface. You need to be
Yeah.
in the back end. So we
And you
go
may not be
through
able
this
to afford that niche. You may not be able to afford somebody who has, an expert back end. You just kind of get
totally.
whoever you want if you're just, mostly an equity based, startup.
Exactly. So it was like we would go through these conversations, but a lot of the time it was us talking with people in HR. Because even as we were scaling, like, did we have dedicated recruiters? Like, not even in the beginning. Like, we had to, the HR team would go kind of build that part out. But we would have conversations about what we're looking for in the role. A lot of the time, they would do an excellent job kind of giving us a bit of a template or something to kind of work within. So it's not just us being like, send us devs, like hopefully they know C sharp and like, or we're getting too specific. So they would do a good job balancing that with us, but we would put in a lot of feedback about what we're looking for in those candidates. So that was a really good like back and forth kind of relationship. And like I said, over time, we just kind of realized that just looking for general developers has been a great experience. Now, since I've left that company, I can imagine that how they've grown. They may be in a position where they started looking for more specific developers. Like I even before, right before I left, there was some opportunity for like, hey, we need someone who's like really good at like being able to work in the cloud because that was new for the company. It was all desktop based or doing more stuff in the cloud. So feeding that kind of stuff back to the HR side and the recruiters, I think like those conversations had to be there. The relationship had to be formed to try and communicate that kind of stuff. Um, in terms of like getting resumes through those people, certainly like we'd have to set up like a minimum bar. So we had like phone screens, and the way that the phone screens were done were basically, I think it was like 20 questions, and the bar was like you basically had to get all 20 of them right. I think you could get one wrong, and it seems like that's a really high bar, but the questions were like the most basic like concepts in programming that the point was that if you couldn't answer all of them very easily, it basically suggested that you probably have never programmed before. So it
Okay.
seemed like a high bar, like on paper, but just very, very trivial questions. And that would end up kind of screening out just a lot of candidates that were almost like noise, like I have not actually programmed, but trying to get a job. Um, and then, yeah, we'd get resumes, review them, and then we'd have that feedback with the recruiters to say, hey, we keep getting these resumes like that kind of look like this. We might have miscommunicated the technology we're interested from backgrounds, so they could do a better job filtering them. Or we'd say like, hey, we tried to be clear about how much experience or different things, and like this isn't really lining up. So again, really good conversations back and forth with that group.
to make sure I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like it's very collaborative, iterative, and there's a lot of conversation back and forth. I'm interested, what does that look like for at a larger company? Is that
Yeah.
relationships still exist, or is it a lot more like formal and structured?
I feel like it's a lot more formal. And I should be transparent that while I've been at Microsoft, I have been put onto teams where I was part of the hiring for the team. So the team was being built up and I was part of being put onto that team. So I have done interviewing at Microsoft, but what I have not done is I have not put up my job descriptions to get hires. I've been very close, especially when we have people moving around. And so you have someone that switches teams or someone that leaves and you try to backfill, and we have to go put up a job description. But a lot of the time, that was mostly like pretty generic. It was like, we hired someone for this role before, reuse the same thing, right? So uh, I'm not saying that there was no opportunity to collaborate, but it just seemed like it was mostly in place. So
Sure.
that's
That
one
makes
of the
sense.
experiences I had there. And I guess even when I was not hiring and still doing interviews, I would have resumes sent over to me for review and stuff like that, even for candidate selection. So I've been able to um, basically have the interviews were done, and this is before I joined the team, and then I was part of the candidate selection after that. So going through like the interview feedback, the resumes, and being able to pick candidates.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier as you're talking about this back and forth that mostly you weren't getting the type of candidates that we talked about earlier, the non-traditional backgrounds, that the boot
Right.
camp graduates. So you're putting yourself in somebody like that's shoes, right? They're 30s or 40s, later in their career, have experience in another industry. They've done some self-taught program or a boot camp. They want to
Right.
get into Microsoft. They want to work for this startup. How would you suggest they go through that process so that they aren't filtered at the recruiter level? Because it sounds like you'd be open to
Oh yeah.
working with somebody with that background. So why are they getting blocked earlier in the process? And if how could they break through that noise?
Sure. I think so. There's a few different things that are going on, at least in my opinion. I don't have like data to back this up, but from
Sure,
what
yeah.
I believe is happening, and I'm not a scientist, but I think especially in big tech, like what we're seeing right now is that because there's so much volume, we kind of said this earlier, like the bar ends up getting set higher. So there's probably still a lot of job postings that are going up, and it's like you need to have a bachelor's degree, right? And some of the automated systems, like if you're not checking the box that says bachelor's degree, it's like you basically just can't proceed. Some of them don't have it, depending on the company too. It might list it in the requirements, but there's no automated process that's like they didn't check the box, therefore they can't move on. So
Yeah.
for in those situations, I would say like apply, just literally apply. If you can get through the onboarding or the sort of the
The
process to
knockout
submit,
questions. Knockout
yeah,
questions,
like
what I'm thinking they're typically called. Yeah.
yeah, if you can get through all that stuff and like you feel good about being able to do the role, like I would still just apply for sure. Um, the startup side is a little bit different because I would say that there's less automated process in place generally. Um, just because you're not going to pay for some expensive system when you have the one person who can go through the resumes and stuff coming in, and you can offload that to the engineers on the teams or the engineering managers to say, hey, like let's spread the love, and you guys all have to help. So in those situations, again, like apply, even if the job description says like, hey, we wanted 4 years, bachelor degree kind of thing. The reason I say to do that is because if you have the opportunity to bypass like a quick filter, and you might need to use some volume here when applying, but if you can get past an initial, like, oh, I was looking for a bachelor's degree just because I think that's what we're supposed to look for. Now someone has this opportunity to see all of the awesome stuff you've done. So once you get past that first barrier of potentially being filtered, you can showcase anything awesome that you've done. And I think it's really just about standing out. If you don't have tons of years of experience professionally, you don't have the university degree, this is your opportunity to be building stuff, talking about how you're making real things, forming relationships, working with other people. Like you can really showcase a lot that stands out.
Yeah, most new developers really just need a chance at that conversation because
Right.
most people that I work with are struggling even getting the interview, right?
Right.
It's the knockout questions or it's the higher bar when we talk about entry level roles with years of experience that they don't have that's causing them to not even get that first interview.
Right.
So let's say then hypothetically you can't check any of those boxes of the bachelor's degree, the X number of years of experience, but you feel confident you can do the job. Should they would referrals still get through to you through the recruiter? Should they reach out to managers directly? Like how can they bypass that system that is kind of blocking them out, right?
Yeah. On the big tech side, strictly from Microsoft perspective, I've not worked at Amazon, Facebook and
Sure. Yeah.
Google.
Yeah.
I have plenty of people that will reach out to me. Being on social media, it says, principal engineering manager at Microsoft. I will get connections or messages, and the very first thing is, can you refer me to a job? And
Yeah.
I have to say no. Like basically, I don't know you. I would love for you to be able to land a job. It's not that I don't want you to succeed, but a referral's a very like the bar is set very high for that. I will only refer people that I've worked with for years because my name is attached to it and I need to be very confident in that. So I think I think you can and should try to network 100%. But I think most people approach it incorrectly because the way that they try to network is, hi, I need something from you immediately. And it's weird because you wouldn't do this in person. Like if I walked up to you and I'd never met you and I was just like, hi, I need something from you, you'd probably be like, I don't know you. Like why? Right. But with the internet, it makes it so easy. So what I highly recommend people do is like do network. If you want to go, if you're interested in a company genuinely, go do like see who's on LinkedIn. I think it's a great tool to use. Look for engineering managers, look for the engineers on the team. And don't reach out and say, hey, I want a job from you. Reach out and be curious and say, hey, it looks like you guys are doing awesome stuff. Like, could I ask like maybe about the tech stacks you're using because it seems really interesting and I would love to be able to, kind of move in this direction, right? Start the conversation. You're not trying to ask for something like a job directly, right? You start building that up, have the relationship, and then see if that leads anywhere. But don't have the expectation from the beginning that it will. I think that's a critical thing.
And that's really hard because, well, speaking stereotypically at least, software engineers have not historically been have not historically been known as being people.
Sure.
People like it. Right. We like to sit down in front of our desks and execute on our code for hours on end, and not talk to anybody if we can.
Yep.
But the skill we're asking you to build here is your interpersonal skill, which is
and
an interesting.
You can practice it, right? It's a great opportunity to be practicing these interpersonal skills by saying, okay, like, how do I approach this without jumping into like, just give me the job? Like, it's a great opportunity.
There are literally millions of people on LinkedIn, and each one has the potential to be your next step into your first role. Most will probably ignore you or not agree not to help you, but you only need one,
Right.
which means if you approach it more of just, this is just practice and I'm trying to get better, then don't take it personally when somebody doesn't message you.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting dynamic about the job search, though, because there's this aspect of the skills that are required to be successful at the job, programming, analytical thinking, whatever, is oftentimes very different from the skill set needed to get a job. You talk about, interpersonal skills, networking, marketing, even, your ability to write well, like on your resume, on your LinkedIn. These are different skills. There's that separation there.
Aside from networking, the other thing I want to mention is volume and the types of companies you're applying to, because I think a lot of people that are brand new, they're like, I need to go work at Facebook. And it's like, you don't. You just don't. And you're going to be probably upset if you keep applying and don't get it. So that might be an angle.
Sure. That's an important angle to understand, because there are more people that have lived successful programming lives that have not worked at big tech than those who have worked at big tech. There are more programmers than there are just those at big tech.
I've never planned to work in big tech. That was not even on my agenda until basically it came up. But yeah.
Yeah, and that later in your career when you were more established, and we can talk about your specific journey,
Sure.
Another day. But that's an important thing to understand, is that your first job is probably not going to be your dream job.
Yeah,
Your first job is going to be
possible.
Yeah, you're probably going to be working, on some software for some trucking company, or, what have you, because they need a website, and that's what you build, and you kind of just build from there. So I like to say have low expectations for the first one or two jobs even.
Getting your first house, it's probably not the dream mansion with 10 bedrooms and, waterfront. It's probably not, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your perspective and kind of unpacking the dynamics depending on the size of the company that you're applying for. I think that's a great a great perspective to understand. I want to give you a chance here, though. You are also on YouTube. You're active on social media. If
And
somebody
yes.
was wanting to reach out to you and kind of expand on any of your opinions here and get your perspective on the job search, where can they reach out to you? How can they connect with you?
For sure. Yeah. Probably the place I'm most active is on LinkedIn. So if you search for Nick Cosentino, if you look for dev leader, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I do get a lot of messages on LinkedIn, like a lot of creators will. Generally, if you're asking me for time to sit down and talk, it's really difficult for me to schedule a lot of people. Got a lot of things to do. But what I try to do is say, hey, send me questions. I will put together videos. I do live streams. I'm happy to go answer all of those things for you. And this way I can help other people because I guarantee they'll have the same questions that you're having too. So people can reach out to me on LinkedIn for sure. And then the streaming or my YouTube videos and stuff, it's on YouTube. I try to post stuff on every single platform. So if you aren't active on YouTube or LinkedIn, if you search for Dev Leader on a platform, I'm hopefully there and you can reach out to me there too.
All right, we can test your SEO skills
That's right.
to see how. Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on. I'll include links to all of those sites here in the show notes if
Awesome.
anybody's interested in following up later. But with that, thank you for coming on, Nick. Great
Of
conversation.
course. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Junior Jobs Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe, as that helps us reach more developers in need. And don't forget to check the show notes for details on today's sponsor and other job search services that we provide.